Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to 5-Minute GCSE. I know it's been a while, we've had a hiatus, but we're back doing some more GCSE AQA content for you for history. It is difficult doing these exams, but I fixed our mic and we're back in the game. So, let's jump right into it. We're doing the impact of World War I on Germany. Now, as a recap, previously we have done the Germany under the Kaiser, a two-part series. If you haven't watched that, you should go watch that. But the recap is that by 1914, the tension in Europe was high as the Entente powers like France and Great Britain confronted the Central powers like Germany and Austria-Hungary. I do recommend that you do go through World War I as a whole, but this course doesn't actually require you to do that, but I think you should just for your own own knowledge. But this course doesn't require you, so we'll briefly go over it and really focus on the impact here. And as we said, leaders like Kaiser Wilhelm pursued aggressive foreign policy, which it was called a Weltpolitik, as you remember, which destabilized the situation even more. And on the 28th of June 1914, the famous, or infamous, should I say, assassination of Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand set off a chain of events which led to the First World War, the Great War, as it's called. And in just 4 years, this conflict had killed 40 million people. Now, we will go through a rough timeline for you, but as I've said, I really do recommend you go through it in detail in your own time. In August 1914, the war starts, and it is initially popular and people support the Kaiser. But eventually, naval blockades by the British cause food and medical shortages, and this support for the war rapidly dwindles. By 1915, anti-war protests grow, from 500 to 10,000 people participating. So it's really starting to pick up momentum. Now, by 1917, America joins the war, and this is a big turning point, because by April, the Germans start getting pushed back. And during the winter, the period is even known as the turnip winter because of the terrible food shortages that the people suffered. Now by October 19, the Kiel Mutiny spreads through the army as Germany really realizes that they are losing the war and are about to lose. And with rising pressure by November 1918, Kaiser agrees to hand over some power. But in the end, what he does is not enough, and he soon abdicates and flees from Germany. Now, Germany lost the war, as we know. But what next? Because German suffering was not limited to a feeling of defeat. That was, of course, important, and that fueled especially extremist parties, and as we'll see down in later videos, political unrest. Immense political unrest. But the Great War had severe social, economic, and political consequences. Those are the really big three you have to remember in exam, and they could ask you something like, in what ways was Germany affected by the First World War? Now, the first is the social impact of this massive war. Now, Germany became much more divided as a result of it. Some workers had their wages cut during the war, whereas factory owners got richer during it. And this again links back to the socialism and its growth, as we've talked about in the previous video. There was also a huge demographic change in Germany, as 2 million Germans dying led to women outpopulating men, and orphaned youth being unable to find their place in society. Mass population movements also occurred, and this is also partly due to the Treaty of Versailles, which is a landmark treaty, which we will talk about in the next video. It's perhaps one of the most important in the 20th century. Rapid demobilization fueled rising unemployment rates too. There was 6% unemployment rate in early 1919. Now that was very high, considering the success that the German economy and German society experienced in 1914 prior to the war. Women also worked in the factories, and this not only damaged traditional family values, but also they were then forced out after World War I, which created more social tension. Now economically, it was obviously terrible for the German economy. Germans were literally bankrupt by the end of it. Yet not only did you have debt from Kaiser's naval laws, but also obviously the spending, the armament during the war, the paying of the soldiers, paying for their food, it just costs so much, and it's estimated to be $40 billion in old money, of course without inflation. Now it would be well over $1 trillion, so the cost was immense. Their industrial output also fell by over 40% between 1914 and 1918, and their country had to spend a third of its income on war pensions by 1918. Germany also lent money to its allies like Austria-Hungary, but now it was unlikely that they would get their money back. German factories were also exhausted by wartime weapons production, and that is just some of the economic impacts. And the last one, as we've said before, is the political impact of World War I. Now, before the war, Germany had been a stable, rich nation, but now it was plagued by chaos, from mutinies to revolutions. Now, a key thing here is that many ex-soldiers and civilians thought that they had been betrayed, that Germany could have won the war, but the politicians signed the deal with France and Britain, and so they called them the November criminals. And that really harshened not only, I guess, a social, but especially a political divide in German society. Now that is the end of the video, guys. Please do like, subscribe, and comment if you want more of these. We will be doing more of these, as we've said before, and I wish you luck in the GCSE exams.